And the last word the wife said to the husband was, "You loved me into existence." And all of us should aspire to be that loving, that kind, instead of just going what normally happens to the honeymoon phase. And what ordinarily happens to the honeymoon phase is jobs sort of take it over, right? Jobs sort of take it over. And you have kids, and for those of us that have had children, kids sure as hell take it over, right? And you end up looking at each other and...
Did you use a brown word?
Yes, well, sort of. Well, I can say a Vinci hell, so then it's okay. But we sort of lose perspective of the priorities in our lives. And so now that we've studied dependent origination, now that we've studied karma, now that we've studied, that there is the nature of suffering in life, and that the suffering has a cause, and that good news, as Emmanuel said last week, it can end. There's a way out. That's wonderful. Now we got to work at it. Now we got to appreciate the opportunity that we have, believe that we're worthy of that opportunity, and actually be willing to change. Because when you think about it, the Four Noble Truths, there's nothing noble about truth. If I say that this table is flat, there's nothing noble about that. If I say that there's suffering in our lives, there's nothing necessarily noble in that. The reason why it's noble is you apply it to your lives. It gives us an opportunity to be noble in our lives. So these are four aspects of our experience, these Four Noble Truths, that when applied, give us the opportunity to seek real happiness. Does that sort of make sense? Okay. So, now that we've sort of discussed that, the way that Dharma is put together is often very significant. So, for example, when we look at the Four Noble Truths, and the first Noble Truth is suffering, right? Is that an effect or a cause? Well, I've sort of told you. Right? So it's an effect. So we're listing off the effect first. And then we go to the cause of that effect, which is the cause of suffering, attachment related to desire. And then we see nirvana. Well, nirvana is an effect of a cause, and the cause is the Eightfold Path. So why would Buddha list the effect first?
Get our attention.
Right, because to get our attention, because most of the time, what do we focus on? Most of the time we focus on effects. I think most of the time we focus on the things that are before us and how they impact us. Right? In an earlier class this morning, we were talking about resentment, and it's like, when you're sick, okay, and you go, why me, why me, why me? What you're really saying is, why not someone else? Why can't someone else be sick? Right? But we're focused on, we're sick. Well, why are we sick? Well, maybe we didn't wash our hands enough. Maybe we're, someone's saying, I've got a cold, and you decide to kiss them anyway, right? So there can be all of these easy ways to look at it and just focus on the effects. But typical people who are not practicing Buddhism will focus on effects. It's said that bodhisattvas, awakening beings, people engaged in the process of awakening, focused on causes. Because if you focus on causes, you're creating the conditions and the effects that are going to follow you in the future. So there's a saying, just to further emphasize that, there's a saying that's saying, if you want to know your past, look at your current conditions. Look at where you're at now. Look at, your existence now. If you want to know your future, look at what you're doing now. So we generally tend to go along life just waiting for nice effects. Does anybody remember the sentence that I asked you to think about 2 weeks ago? It's a long time ago, I know. Does anybody remember the sentence? Free lunch for anybody who can, no? Okay, so what the sentence is, you may recall, was, we are not the audience of joy, we are the author. because too many of us wait along for the next thing that's gonna make us happy. You know, you ask someone, say, well, why do you love your husband? What's a normal sort of answer? He makes me happy. You hear that, right? He makes me feel loved, right? He does this for me. Sort of like, what have you done for me lately, sort of thing. But in the end, the other people don't give us happiness. Okay? We have to do what we can to make ourselves happy. And once you're in that practice, understanding how you can make other people happy. So when we look at the first, and we talk in the introduction about the Four Noble Truths, and Emmanuel said this last week, can be broken up into two pairs. So the first pair is suffering and the cause of suffering. Okay? So that when we first realize, and you truly must understand what is suffering in your life, and how suffering really, and what suffering can also be known as the word dukkha, and dukkha can be, it's a Pali word, and dukkha can be translated not only into suffering, but into another couple of words. Does anybody know what those other words might be? Dissatisfaction. So everybody goes, well, I'm not suffering. Okay, well that may be true. You're not suffering. We're in a very nice place. Like I said, we're living in a very privileged opportunity. But how many of us are always content? You're always content? Or is there some level of dissatisfaction? And how much of our happiness is related to suffering? That's a real difficult question. Start doing inventory of that. So for example, what's your favorite drink? Zeus, what do you like to drink? Don't say vodka.
Would tequila work?
No, tequila. Zeus, we talked about this. What's your favorite drink?
Cranberry juice.
Cranberry juice. Very healthy. Very good answer. Okay. Barry, what's your favorite drink?
He's going through.
Don't hand the microphone to Tony. No.
No.
You can say ice cold beer, that's fine. You know, Coke, yeah, okay. Ryan, what's your favorite drink?
I'll take it a step further and say water.
Water, okay.
I like water.
Very-
Water is in all other juices, all other liquids, so why focus on that when I can just drink water?
Okay, so if you see Ryan drinking anything other than water, knock it out of his hand. The point that I was going to make is we all have our choices. And there's nothing wrong with having choices, of enjoying something other than water, okay? But if you've been, and if any,
Chocolate milk.
yeah, there you go. If anybody has been short of water, if anybody's worked outside and not had the opportunity to drink, if you've gone on a long hike and forgotten about water, or stayed outside working too long with no water, when you drink that water, how does it feel? How does that taste? Ice cold water after working all day. It's heaven, isn't it? Right? And when you're drinking it, you go, this is the most beautiful experience ever. But it's only beautiful experience because it's related to the amount of suffering you had prior to it. That happiness is directly related to the relief of suffering. Okay, now we're going to take it down to a toilet level.
I was just thinking about that.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so of your list of favorite things to do, and I won't go around the room because I'm scared of what Ryan or Zeus is going to say. If you say the favorite thing to do, going to the bathroom, would that be one of them? No. It's pedestrian, it's disgusting. In movies, you ever notice movie stars never close doors behind them and never use the bathroom in movies. They never do, right? But after you've held it in for a 4-hour car ride, when you're standing in the bathroom, is that not heaven? Oh, right? It's heaven. It's happiness. It's relief because it's related to suffering. So you may not sit here and say all of life is suffering, but think of the amount of happiness in your life that's not related to suffering. And as you go through it, you'll find that a lot of happiness in a mundane way is related to relief from suffering. And is the relief from suffering ever permanent? Do you get thirsty again? And after drinking lots of water, after the next 4-hour car ride, do you desperately have to use the bathroom again? Yes, you do. When Alistair's out sailing, well, your sailboats probably have bathrooms, right?
Head.
Some of them, yeah, some of them. The head, as it's called, right? So, so when we take a look at suffering, we may not say, oh, we're suffering terrible, because to tell you the truth, when you're really suffering, when you have cancer, when you've lost a loved one, it's very hard to practice, because your whole existence is that suffering. But you really practice, and people say this, how do we practice when it's hard? How do we practice when it's difficult in our lives? We practice when it's easy for times when it's hard. We accumulate the tools with the great, as Andy calls it, battle, or as I like to call it, the big spiritual smackdown. Okay? We equip ourselves with wisdom. We equip ourselves with truth to understand that when we do suffer, how do we deal with it? How do we make that right? So when we look at the cause of suffering, the cause of the suffering is, attachment based on desire and all of that. But in the middle of our suffering, do we have a practice that allows us to stop, to not allow us to lose our temper? That's one of my favorite terms, besides envy, as far as, difficulties and hindrances in our lives. Losing your temper. Do you know what losing your temper means? It means you went crazy. You lost your ability to be able to temper your behavior. You went crazy. And we've all been there. Have you ever said anything in anger that as soon as you said it, can't take that back, right? Said hurtful things to those people that we love. Said insensitive people to those people we should have had mercy for. We lost our temper. Okay? So we see that the cause of suffering is there, and it's something that we have to be able to address. Okay? Then the next pair of cause and effect is freedom from the causes of suffering. And how do we end the causes of suffering? And the good news is, if there's a cause to suffering, then we can choose a new cause for a different result. We are not hardwired to suffer this way. It's programming. If we were hardwired to suffer, we couldn't change anything. And that's one of the good sides of impermanence, that we have an opportunity to change. We have an opportunity to create new causes for new effects. So we have a choice.